Hey guys, so in this lecture we are going to be covering boolean values. I know we discussed a little bit about the true and the false in the previous lectures, but let's dig deep into what boolean values are. So boolean is another data type that JavaScript supports. A JavaScript boolean represents one of the two values, which is either a true or a false. You can use boolean mostly in the conditions where you have something like a yes or a no flag or an on and off or true or false kind of a situation. That's the best place where you can use a boolean. So you can also use a boolean function to find out if an expression is true. So for instance, let's just close this output, open the console, and let's just use the boolean function and pass in some condition to it. So let's say if 5 is less than 6, and let's try to run this. The answer is true. Now, that's the boolean function. But there is a better way of doing this. You don't even have to do this, which is remove the boolean and do it, and it will still run. The answer is still true. That also is not needed. If you just do a 5 is less than 6, the answer will still remain the same. So, whenever you check any condition in JavaScript and the resultant is a true or a false, it will always result in a true or false. You don't need explicitly to mention that if it's a boolean function or something like that. So we have already covered the comparisons, which is one of them is like less than. So there are many other comparisons that we have already covered. The other one is the check for equality, which is console.log, and let's say 5 is double equal to 5. In this case, it should return me a true. And if it doesn't, then there's a problem. If it is 5 equals to 6, the answer should be false. So these are conditions that you can check for. Now let's see what will return a true value. So boolean will return a true value for anything that is a real value, which means let's say if I have 100, let's just comment this too, so we can see what the real values are. All real values will return true. In this scenario, it may not work directly because the 100 is a number and it just consoles out a number. So you might have to do a boolean here and try and see what happens. And the answer is true. Similarly, you can do boolean expression for anything that you want to. Let's say I have a decimal number or I have a negative number for that matter. All these scenarios will return a true because they are real values and you can compute something. Similarly, if you have a computation, let's say 2 plus 3 plus 5, in this scenario too it should return a true, the 4 trues. And we have already seen this condition, which we do not need to showcase. The moment you have a condition parameter, you don't need to express a boolean. Let's say 100 is less than 101. In this scenario too, it will return a true. So there are 5 trues and 5 console logs. What if you have a string? Let's say, for example, you have a string hello. In this case, it will pass in, again, when you do a console log of hello, it will give you a hello. But when you do a boolean of this particular item, you should see what it returns, and the answer will again be true. There are 6 trues. What if instead of the string hello, I pass in a false? What should happen then? Well, the answer is it will still be a true because it just considers this as a string and it has a value. Now, everything which is not real in the same way will be false. So, all non-real values will return false. Let me just quickly add some comments so that we know that we are dealing with. So, console.log. Let's say I have this as real values and this is non-real values. Okay, variable x is equals to 0. Let's do a console.log boolean of x. Let's try what will happen. The answer is false because x of 0 is always a false. What if you have x is equals to minus 0? Let's try to do that as well. So if x is equals to minus 0, the answer should still remain the false. If you have an empty string, so if you evaluate, I don't even have to give an x, I can just try and evaluate an empty string, and the answer should again be false because it doesn't have any value. There's no value to it. Similarly, if you have just a variable declared but never assigned a value, let's say variable y, and you just go and say boolean of y, in this scenario also it will return you a false because it holds undefined, so there's no value to it. And the same applies for null. So if you have a null value, again if you run this, you will see 5 false. 1 2 3 4 5. If you have not a number, let's say if variable x is equals to 10 divided by, or 10 multiplied by a string, which is not possible. In this case you will have, sorry, I just have copy pasted things. Let's try to do a boolean of x. In this case it's not a number and it should still return a false. So these are the conditions that you will check. For real values you will check for a true, and for non-real values you will check for a condition of false. And depending on these conditions, your program can actually take alternate routes. Primitive values like true and false cannot have properties or methods because they are not objects. But with JavaScript, methods and properties are also available to primitive values because JavaScript treats primitive values as objects when executing methods and properties. I will also share a complete reference on the Boolean. Make sure you go through it, and I think it's very easy but very useful to know Booleans.